When you mentioned the existing processes that you will look at, will you be focusing more on the environmental aspect or the social, or how will you kind of divide this part?
I mean, I think it'll be both, definitely. I mean, we're using the FSSD as our analytical tool, so it really has to be both, you know, kind of all four SPs.
Yeah, but I mean, is there a particular emphasis on one of them and why? If there is, or if you...
No, I don't think that, no, we have any particular emphasis in mind. I mean, I think when we looked, I mean, you know, when we did our tools and concepts assignments, I don't think that we, you know, decided in advance to sort of put any particular emphasis on one aspect of the FSSD.
We define sustainable procurement, and for us, sustainable procurement means that it is in alignment with the 4 SPs, so, yeah.
The other one was, I remember when we gathered in the big room on the other building, that you might have mentioned like a guidebook, to build on a guidebook for practices. Have you given any more thoughts on it? Are you going to go ahead with, like, try to formulate a guidebook for best practices? Or
It's not really a guidebook, I would say. But actually it's a good question, because we thought of it, because in the beginning we thought, oh, we'd like to create a tool that companies can really use. Like, you know, many companies use, for example, Excel sheets, or I don't know, something like that for Tirit. But yeah, we want to, but perhaps in the end it's just recommendations we're going to create, because it's really very ambitious to create a tool for companies, yeah, for all kind of companies. So.
I mean, because we've kind of envisioned to some degree like a decision-making framework, maybe not too indifferent from like the TSPD, for instance, like sort of like a set of questions or criteria or steps that people should, you know, procurers should sort of walk through in making procurement decisions or in evaluating what they're going to buy.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Well, yeah, I get maybe 2 questions. The first is that you deal with some tools, some existing tools, and you want to improve the existing tools, but you didn't mention any tools. So it means that you, like, have you found any of these, or you?
Well, certain organizations in the UN can voluntarily use the UN Global Compact, and then other organizations just have their own, like, really loose guidelines. That's what I've found so far in the INGO, the UN organizations that I've looked into. But we're hoping that in speaking with some of the people that actually work in this area, that we'll be able to get some more substantial details. Because yeah, right now it's pretty, and they're all pretty heavily. I mean, I know it's a different world, but each one has a different reason for why they're procuring agricultural products. Like, some of them are procuring the products because they actually want, like, large stockpiles of food, but then others are procuring them as a form of social development. So, you know, they're trying to procure from countries that are close to the donor or the aid country, and so that they can provide work and, you know, stimulate the economy of the neighboring countries. So it's pretty complicated so far.
And we also get the sense that there's some, like the larger the company, for instance, the more likely it is that they have produced their own method or their own tool. And then we kind of get the sense also that within different branches of the UN, they have decided on their own practices, their own processes. And then, you know, there are tools like Procura Plus, and there's things that we've talked about with Cecilia that, you know, have sort of been applied across, you know, different companies, like marketable tools. And we have definitely thought about looking at those as best we can to try and identify what is best about them and how well they work. So.
Okay. Well, and Thank you. And just for answering, like maybe give like some idea for the question about what will the sustainable procurement will look like in the future. So maybe like have you thought about like the finance and the importance of like the stock market and the development of this sector, this industry of the food? Because maybe just like in the future, maybe like a fully sustainable procurement method will be like a procurement totally unlinked to the market, the stock market,
Right.
and maybe more local sourced, so not all this
Right.
international trade of
Right.
corns and.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have 2 questions as well. So you were talking about big corporations and also INGOs. So the reason for that is it to have a balance or 2 sides of the coin, to see how they're doing or how they're doing, and try to like find out something from that, like balancing weights?
I think our original intention when we can answer this, but was that we had this kind of assumption that a lot of multinationals would be kind of steps ahead of the game, and that INGOs would have like a lot to learn from multinationals, and so we were thinking that we would look at them and then make suggestions on what they were doing well that could be implemented into INGO's procurement process. Getting into it a little bit deeper, that may be changing.
But I think even if we focus exclusively on INGOs and relief organizations, even if they are sort of going to be our target audience, we definitely would like to look at some procurement practices, decision-making frameworks that exist within multinationals or just companies in general that have been working towards a sustainable supply chain for a while, just to sort of see what it is that they're doing, because we're trying to go for like a solutions-oriented thesis, a best practices-oriented thing, make recommendations, and so if really anything that we can get out of the public sector or the private sector that could apply is fair game.
Thanks. And you said that the definition for sustainable procurement would be to have the 4 SPs. So wouldn't it be to get them to understand the whole idea with FSSD? Isn't making it easier for them to understand it? Couldn't that be a good leverage point?
Definitely.
Instead of using another tool, or just making them understand much easier.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hugest benefits of SSD.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Yeah, that reminds me of what Jason Ledbetter talked in his lecture. It's like for companies, it's the FSSD approach is very it's better than other approaches, because it's so easy to understand and also scientific based. So perhaps with this approach, we can reach them better than with another approach.
Thanks, Shadow Group. Time to move
Thank
on.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was, I think, so far most straightforward. All the presentations I've heard. It's a very, very nice and engaging introduction technique first. Then there's a big picture challenge and the funnel, nice. You're scoping down from that picture to your topic with a well-motivated bullet list of problems as well as the global potential for your topic. For instance, regarding the fact that various INGOs have different frameworks. And you did all of that without mentioning FSSD, which is precisely what you should do. You should talk about that big scope and the problem and the topic and everything. The FSSD is not there. And in that introduction, you introduce certain aspects and things that we need to solve that will call for the FSSD and then you introduce it. That is very clear here, and I like it. Nice and straightforward research question, and then as regards the remarks, I only have a few, since this was so good and straightforward. One is that there is a related MSLS thesis about textile production in China, which is precisely focusing on procurement and branding companies in the midst of value change. I think you should refer to that. Another valuable reference would be Sissy's PhD work. I think you thought about that already, about procurement and so forth. You might find something if you just browse it. Then I love your response to the shadow group as regards sticking to what the FSSD is designed to do. It is designed to create a creative tension field between all principles for sustainability, not favoring one on behalf of the other. So you don't have any focus here. It's the creative tension field between all four. I love that response. That's precisely what I dreamt of. As regards the social aspect, which was then in focus, Marlena has just recently developed 5 zero hypothesis principles for social sustainability, which would be a further fleshing out of the social principle into something which is more operational. And I don't suggest that you use that and then go big about it. Just browse it and see if it will trigger some creativity of how to tackle the social issues in this field. And if you then find something which is very nice, then you have a licentiate thesis to refer to now. But I don't suggest that you would increase the workload or anything like that, just mentioning it. If your scope is reduced to only go for INGOs, why not at least interview a few multinationals and see how they respond to your proposed framework, and then point at future research that they will done. And tell me if they look worried and tormented when you do it. Finally, exactly how are you going to study existing frameworks? You are going to use the FSSD as a lens, that's what you say, and you say you're going to do it in line with the tools and concepts approach. My question is, do you in line with that intend to go for an interface analysis? An interface analysis means that it's a more extensive FSSD lens than going directly from the 5 boxes. It only means that you fill in the boxes first with, in this case, I guess it would be the global procurement of agro products with the big challenges, global challenges. And then you scope in on your particular topic with INGOs and big companies and so forth. So that you do a very big scoping exercise and fill in the boxes first. Regardless if you publish that in your thesis or not, it's very helpful because then you have a good theory before you begin. So what do you expect will happen when you read all the literature and do all the interviews, so that is filled in a robust, structured way where the system, what you want in the system, strategies are lined out and so forth. And then when you read the literature and do your interviews, it is much greater chance that you will really identify the UC empirical data that will be helpful for you and to avoid drowning in the stuff which is not so helpful. And finally, why not open up a company based on this thesis afterwards? I would certainly help you. You could drive it and continue to run that office. I would be happy to assist. Yeah, good. Okay, that's my point.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for a nice, engaging presentation. And Charlie took a lot of things here, and I will just add a few things. So, maybe going a bit deeper into how you will address the companies or the organizations. You mentioned that there are 3 big companies as a leverage point for controlling the grain trade, for
That
example.
was an example,
And maybe you will address a few companies. Do you see a challenge to address them? Are they interested in hearing this? Or I'm just saying they make profit from the current model of things. So do you think they see a problem and they want to change something, or do you think that they are maybe not so interested in changing how they do it.
Yeah, that is the reason why we want to look at companies which have already kind of sustainable tools or sustainable approach. At least they say. For example, Unilever, they are quite popular for their sustainable guidelines they have. In our eyes, it's perhaps not sustainable, but they call it sustainable. So they do already something, as they know the problem. So I think they are more open than other companies, but that's actually the point. Yeah.
And also, I would say that, and I'm going to paraphrase from my favorite TED Talk here, but like a lot of the smart companies, the way that they're looking at this now is in terms of their future ability to access the commodities that they need and that they're required to function. That they're thinking less in terms of price and more in terms of just whether or not they can actually get it. And so it's increasingly becoming in their interest to start buying more sustainably grown commodities and cooperating with other companies just to ensure that in the future there is what they need to keep moving forward.
So that's good. They are actually seeing a long-term sustainability picture in that case. I have just a few more. Thank you. A thought that struck me. I don't know. Have you read Ishmael by Daniel Quick? No. Yeah. It's a really interesting book because he addresses the same thing, among other things. But he addresses how the growth of human population and affluence, and how that started in the agricultural society when that came, the agricultural revolution. But how it since then has been a chase between growing availability of food and then growing population. So those two things are chasing each other in a spiraling loop. So his suggestion was that before that there was a balance with the number of people and the amount of food you used. But we're often talking about this. Now we need to feed this many people. And then we do. And then there's more people coming. And now we need to feed even more people. So I think you need to go into that loop in some way. And I'm thinking about, I know it's a very sensitive issue because some people say, okay, then we need to control the population. How will we do that? But I think if we don't do it intentionally, sooner or later it will happen to us. Because we cannot grow an infinite amount of food on this planet. So I think we need to go into that issue in this business, as mentioned. But it's a really good book.
But do you think of referring to that in our introduction?
Yeah, probably, because I think we should not only say, stay in this idea of now we need to increase the food production this much, and then I mean, there is more to it, I think. So,
Yeah, it's a very contested topic right now.
yeah.
You know, kind of which came first, or which is going to be the limiting factor.
But would we not, I was just thinking in writing about that, would we not kind of have to support the assumption that the population would continue to grow as long as we can feed it?
Somehow, yes.
Which may be hard to do, and we kind of have to make our own.
It's another thesis you mean.
Right, kind of.
It's like another PhD.
Yeah. I guess what you could do is that you could mention it in the introduction and say that we have this growing system, and then how to deal with that. There are many suggested ways to deal with that. Some people, and then you can mention this approach in that context. But you don't need to go into everything that you do in the introduction. But I think, it should be there in the introduction.
Thanks, advisors. We need to move on to the audience now.